folks, to St. Joe's once more. Something a little bit different today, as we're going to record the homily separately. I'm still trying to find formats that work. This is a throwback for me. This is a format that I used back in COVID times and reaching out to folks. So, taking the readings from the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops. These are the same readings that you would have in church, but it's just a great resource to use anywhere you go. It's very accessible, and you can also skip ahead to readings anytime during the year, or go back to readings that you like. So 29th Sunday in Ordinary Time, and I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a behind the scenes of how a homily is put together, or at least how Father Dan puts a homily together. Every priest is a bit different. You get to see the end product, of course, and you know that every priest is different, but we all study a little bit differently as well. And there's research that can go into this as well. We're going to kind of skip that step today. Just start as I would start, as though you were encountering the readings for the first time, although Father Jim and I have been wrestling with these readings all week. So I don't always read them in the same order, actually, that they're presented in the liturgy. I will often skip down to the gospel and then sometimes work backwards. And I don't actually pay as much attention to the responsorial psalm as some priests do. Some really find this to be the secret of successful preaching is tying in the responsorial psalm as well. So. But as I read through the readings, I'm looking for something that strikes in some way, that has some feeling to it. Maybe it's a sensitive passage that might be troubling people. Maybe it's an exciting or uplifting passage. I'm looking really for an emotional connection, something that resonates. Sometimes it can be something that irritates. I don't like this passage. What is this asking of me? And usually really trying to dig down there and say, well, what's going on here? What is this passage really saying? One of the nice things about working with this format with the bishops is that you can easily click through to see what the context of the passage is. That can be quite important. So what's going on here. But let's start with the gospel. So this is Mark's gospel, probably the first gospel that was written. We have the story of James and John, the sons of Zebedee, that are coming to Jesus and saying, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." Right? Some later versions of this story, it's their mom that's doing it, probably on their behalf. I've seen scholars write on this that that's supposed to make them look better. That, oh my goodness, well, the James and the John would never do this. Their mom did it. Personally, I think having your mom do it is even more embarrassing. It's sort of demeaning. They want to be these great leaders and they can't take responsibility even for that ask. But we're in Mark, so it's James and John, it's the sons of Zebedee coming to Jesus and saying, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And I've preached on this passage before. Maybe you've had people come to you and say, "I want you to do me a favor," right? And it's tempting to just say, "Well, yeah, of course. I'm a helpful person. I'm a caring Christian. I'm just going to dive right in and help you out." Jesus, he doesn't say yes. He doesn't say no. He just wants more details, right? It's always okay to ask for more details before you make a major commitment. What do you wish me to ask? What do you wish me to do for you? And they say, it's a big ask, right? Grant that in your glory we may sit one at your right and the other at your left. It's a prayer of sorts, right? It's a very selfish prayer. But you're asking God for something. And I think when it comes to prayer, when we reach out to God, the kinds of prayers that we have answered, the kinds of prayers that we don't have answered, say you see a neighbor in need, right? You say, "Wow, that person over there, they're hungry, they're cold, they're lonely." And if you go to God in prayer and you say, "God, fix that. God, you are clearly not noticing this person, because if you were and you're a you're a good God. You would have taken care of them already. So, ding, ding, ding. Let me call your attention to this, God, and you handle it, and I'm going to go off and do something else. I don't think those prayers are commonly answered. I don't think that, in my experience at least, that God really needs us to point things out to him. But if you were to go to God and say, God, I'd like to help. Give me ideas. If you were to say, God, I'd like to help this person, the situation in need. I want to change this. I don't like this, and I want to get involved. Give me the courage, Lord. Give me the wisdom, Lord. Those prayers are much more likely to be answered. But here they're very much in full selfish mode here. So Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you're asking. Can you drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism with which I am to be baptized?" Using very symbolic language here, but we're decently far along in Mark. They ought to have a sense of what is going on. But now it's their turn to not ask for details, right? They might have said, as Jesus did up here, what's up with his baptism? Like, okay. They know they're making a big ask. They're being told that there's a price for that, but they're not asking what the price is. They just jump in and make this commitment. And kind of trying to move the conversation along a little bit. And so Jesus is, this cup that I drink, you'll drink. With the baptism with which I baptize, you'll be baptized. Okay, you will pay the price, but you still might not get what you're looking for. It's just kind of cheap, right? But they willingly, eventually, pursue this life that leads to this sacrifice. They do not feel cheated. They will eventually see Jesus suffer and die as well. So the price that Jesus is asking them to pay is one that Jesus himself is willing to pay. But to sit at my right or at my left is not mine to give, but is for those for whom it has been prepared. It's like, well, I can't. He can't. We don't tend to think of things that Jesus can't do. But in this instance, limited slots, and they're already sold out. So when the 10 heard this, they became indignant at James and John, of course, and this is why they came to Jesus privately, and likely also why Jesus doesn't want to make extravagant promises to just a few of his disciples. And then this is the part that really resonated with me as I was reading this, because now we're not really talking about answering questions and kind of diving in here to how to deal with this stuff, but we're really talking about leadership and how Jesus has had to face this situation as a leader and what he's looking for in his disciples as leaders. So that those who are recognized as rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones make their authority over them felt. So this is the passage that sort of resonated with me. It's a negative example. Jesus is as he often does with a negative thing. He's sort of like, it's over there, right? It's those guys over there that are driving you crazy. You don't want to be like those guys, right? You don't like it when other people do that to you. So how are you going to do it? How are you going to treat people? And it's not merely a matter of, boy, I can't wait till I have the throne and do exactly what that guy did to me to everybody else. It's more this idea of, we shouldn't have a throne like that, right? We shouldn't have a situation where somebody's lording it over everyone, and their great ones make their authority over them felt. So it shall not be so among you. Whoever wishes to be great among you will be your servant. Whoever wishes to be first among you will be the slave of all. And this is this idea of leadership. It's not just to my disciples. It's not just to James and John. It's not even just to all the people that follow Jesus. So if you were going to be the king of a nation, it's not just about getting jobs for my friends, right? Taking care of my supporters, making sure that they're watched over. It's the king for everybody. And that doesn't even just mean the whole nation. It means neighboring nations. So we had a presentation earlier this week at Newman North on Catholic social thought and teaching, and how we're really called to work for the good of all, to be the slave of all, not just for those that we are close to or those that are in our own communities, not just for those that we like, but everyone. The church is supposed to work for everyone, just as God loves everyone. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. I had a mentor early on when I was a priest who used to joke that he'd say, I was ordained for service and I expect the best. We are ordained for service, but it's not so that others would serve us, but that we could serve others and take care of others. And we try to be wise in how we do that and to use our time and to give his life as a ransom for many. So the passage to me is really focused on leadership and on how am I doing on time here? Okay, it's really focused on leadership and on what Jesus is looking for in his church, really, of church leaders. So that's what jumped out at me and what I'll probably be focusing on. And then you can sort of like roll back and see, okay, when the church was picking out readings that would accompany this gospel, because the gospel just sort of marches on as time goes on. Next time we'll be picking up a little later in Mark 10 or Mark 11 maybe. And but then they try to pick at least one reading that would line up with that, right? So maybe it's this one. We have a high priest who's passed through the heavens. So this is not just about a heavenly figure that's coming to earth, but an earthly figure that's connected to heaven. We do not have a high priest who's unable to sympathize with our weaknesses. He knows what it's like. He's been similarly tested in every way, yet without sin. So we could be confident in going there. So it's kind of loosely tied in. This is a leader that is worried about the good of all. And not only that, but he's sympathetic to us because he's been here. He knows what it's like down here. He knows what it's like in heaven as well. So a bridging figure, an advocate. Somebody that is, knows our condition down here, knows the ins and outs of heaven, if you will, and is able to go up there and advocate for us. So it's not only a conversation about, what kind of king we want to be, what kind of leader we want to be, but how we relate to Jesus. And then we go back even further and we talk really about the suffering. Because of his affliction, he'll see the light in the fullness of days. Through his suffering, my servant shall justify many, and their guilt he shall bear. So here you could easily tie into the cup, or the chalice, I think, this idea of the suffering that Jesus is about to be baptized. And now you got to edit, right? So I think okay, probably can't do both of that. If I really want to focus on this idea of leadership, then I might need to cut this idea of suffering. The suffering leader. If I want to talk about what's being asked of this leader in terms of their focus and who they help, maybe I don't want to talk about the cost of it, because I'm already... Obviously, I'm talking more at length about details here that wouldn't come out in a full homily, but I'm already over 10 minutes, going on 14 minutes. So that's kind of what goes into the process. So the next thing that I would do once I kind of have that theme and a sense of what readings I want to emphasize is I'm still working backwards here. When I'm putting a homily together, it's usually backwards, and then you hear it forwards. So now that I have this idea, it's like, okay, now what would a story be that would work with this? That's not necessarily biblical. So often I use personal stories. So an experience that I had with a mentor maybe, or family growing up. So now I've got to think like, okay, what's a story about leadership? And this is what I've been struggling with this week, is trying to find a good story for this. But the format that I like is that when I play this forward, I would tell the story. There's usually a little bit of a mystery there, somebody that's trying to race ahead and figure out, okay, well, where's Father going with this? They should be wondering, how is this going to fit into the reading? The secret is I want them to do that, all right? I want you to do that. I want you to hear the story and to enjoy the story, but if you're already trying to figure out my homily before I get there, it'll stick a little bit better, I think. You're already thinking about the readings, and if you're trying to remember the readings while I'm telling the story, they're more likely to stick too. So if I start out telling a story and say, oh, maybe he's talking about leadership. Didn't Jesus talk about leadership in the gospel today? So if you can write my homily for it as I'm giving it, good for you, and hopefully it'll help you to remember it during the week. So one story that comes to mind is a leader that I knew when I was in college. I was working in custodial. So many of us have maybe not ideal jobs when you're a student, and I was vacuuming a lot, and I think I had I don't know if I broke the vacuum or something. I seem to remember I was repairing it with my boss, but my boss was an extremely patient man. Before he became Catholic, he's still Christian, he's Protestant, and he was actually a Protestant pastor. And I went to a Catholic school. When he became he really wanted to work with this school, but they didn't have a teaching position for him. So he agreed to become the head of custodial. It was a servant position. He really wanted to be there. He really wanted to work with students. It's like, okay, can't teach, I'm gonna clean. So here's a situation where I was taking up his time. I had damaged a piece of equipment. It was not a difficult repair, but I think we needed to replace a belt or something like that on the vacuum. And I was really nervous. I thought I was in trouble, but he was very patient with me. And he was actually willing to take the blame. He said, "Well, maybe I didn't teach you right. It's the first time this had happened. I should have explained this better. I'm sorry. Kind of let you down as a leader." And that was very moving to me at the time. Lifted my anxieties, certainly. But even in that moment, I thought, this is the way that Jesus leads us. He's willing to take the blame. And maybe I didn't explain that very well. And he is patient with us. He works with us, to help us to do whatever tasks we have to do better, even if they are sometimes unpleasant tasks. So I thought to myself then, this is the kind of leader that I want to be. He has shown me a side of Jesus that is very scriptural, but also very inspiring, even if it's a very humble one. So a willingness to teach and to work with others, not to sort of lord it over them as a boss, but to really step down, put himself in my shoes, and help me to fix my equipment. But of course, as I told you his story, he was really willing to do that in life, to step down maybe from a position of a pastor or a teacher, say, you know what? I'll clean floors. This is where I need to be right now. Still working with others, and you know what? Still teaching me about Jesus. Still teaching me about service, and witnessing the gospel really through what he did. So maybe that's the story I'll use this weekend. You'd start out telling a story about a boss that helped you out, a positive story, maybe of someone that I'd like to emulate. Someone that I think everyone ought to be able to emulate, and then you dive into the Gospels and pick out this theme of authority. So you'd have the first step would be the story. The second step would be really tying that into the Gospels and exploring that. The third step is the takeaway. That's your closing to the homily. What is it that you want people to walk away from? And the hope would be that you are inspired by this, to be this kind of a leader. Maybe it's something that you're already doing. You think, all right, I'm on the right track. It's an affirming thing. You're just validated in what you're doing. As we're approaching elections, we're choosing leadership, up and down the ballot. So what kinds of qualities are you looking for in a leader? Are you looking for someone that's going to be a leader just for me and mine? Are you looking for someone that's going to work for the good of all, as the church asks us to? So that is part of the takeaway as well. Probably not something I'll explicitly address in the weekend, but or is it maybe a personal challenge? Maybe you've never thought of leadership this way, and you think, oh boy, I gotta chew on this some more. I've got to process this. Is this something that I want to do differently? So those three parts. You'll probably see in my homily. It's a story. It's a dive into the scriptures and how that ties into the story. You're sort of developing a theme, and then what's the implication? How do I live my life going forward? So thank you for joining me today. I don't really have my room set up super well yet here for this kind of thing. Still working on that as I've moved in, but. And a bit longer than your typical homily, but hopefully you enjoyed a little peek behind the scenes into how a homily is put together, or at least how a Father Dan homily is put together.